Okay, so this is going to be an episode where we're going to integrate the context API. I wanted to make this separate from the previous video because I just didn't want to put too much information in just one video. So in this video, we're going to go ahead and set up the context API. So what exactly is the context API? Well, the context API pretty much allows us to provide values to a variety of components that are all grouped together, and we can consume that value in literally any single component. And let's say, for example, if some component wants to update that value, other components will also receive that updated value. Okay, so instead of having to actually nest these components, like have a parent nest the child component, and then have to worry about that, we can actually just create kind of like you can think of it like a global store, where if something happens to the state in, let's say, for example, the category page, then the guild prefix page will also pick up on that as well. In our situation, what we want to do is we want to know what guild that the user is choosing. And when they choose that guild, every single component should know what guild that is. And the reason why is because we need to know which guild that they're trying to configure. Okay, that's how we're going to be able to display to the user which guild that they're currently configuring. That's how we're going to display to the user the guild avatar. We can also display what their current configurations are. Okay, so doing this is a very powerful method, and I'm very excited to show you how we can set that up. So let's go and get started. So the first thing that we'll need to do is we're going to need to go ahead and obviously set up context. So I'm going to create a folder called utils, and I'll create a folder called contexts. Okay, because we might have multiple later, but for now we'll probably only have one. So I'm going to just call this guild context.tsx. Okay, and this guild context is basically going to represent what guild was selected in the menu page. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do guild context equals, and then we're going to go ahead and use the create context method. And this is going to allow us to set up our context. So when you call the create context method, you can actually provide default values for the context. In our situation, we want to provide we can actually just do guild ID, or we can also just do guild. But since we are actually fetching the guild from, we're going to be fetching the guild from the Discord API rather than from the actual database. So I think it's going to be, because we're not fetching the guild configuration, remember? We're fetching these are going to be actual guild objects directly from Discord. So I'm actually just going to worry only about the guild ID for now. Okay. Actually, yeah, this should be a little string literal. If you want to add other properties too, you can. If you've used Redux before, you can think of context like a much more simpler version of Redux, though it's not the same thing, but it's really handy to use. Okay, and you can also type annotate the context too. So for example, if you want to go ahead and do guild context type, you can do that, or whoops. And then you can go ahead and pass this inside the angle brackets, and that would work just fine. Okay, so this should be just fine. And what we want to do now is we want to wrap everything with a provider of the guild context. So how do we do that? Well, first, before I do that, let me explain to you what exactly it means to have a provider for a context. So essentially, the provider is pretty much what is actually going to literally provide the values for the components. Right? That's literally what it does. So with context, it's a provider and consumer pattern. So you have the provider that provides the default value at first, and then the consumer can consume those values, and the consumer can also update that value as well. In our situation, we will need to update the guild ID, because when we select a guild from the menu page, we want to update the context. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and do set guild. Actually, I do update guild ID. And this is going to be a function. Okay, and since we're type annotating this, we also have to set that up here as well. So I'll just type annotate as a void function. Okay, the actual implementation will happen Probably up in the app level. Okay, I'll show you. So let's go, first of all, let's go ahead and wrap this up with a guild context, and we wrap it up with a provider. And you'll see how we can actually provide the values. So you can see that there's a prop called value, and you can literally just pass in values. Wait, hold on. Not sure why my IntelliJ is being weird. There we go. Yeah, I wasn't sure why my IntelliJ was being weird. Okay, there we go. Perfect. So what we're doing now is we are setting up the provider, and we can provide values down to these components. Before I actually do anything else, let me just provide a fake value. So I'll do 1, 2, 3. Okay, and let me show you how we can actually consume this value. So let's go into we can go into any single component, because everything is wrapped with the context. Okay, we probably don't want to wrap everything. I think the only routes we really need to worry about really are just the menu, category, guild prefix, welcome message page, and any other additional page that's protected. We probably don't even need the home page to be wrapped with the provider. So I'll actually fix that right now, and I don't think there should be any issues with that. Let me just double check and make sure that the let me see. Seems like there are issues with that. Yeah, I don't think it likes that. That's kind of unfortunate, because I kind of don't really feel comfortable having the home page in, but I don't think it'll be a huge problem, so we'll leave it alone for now. Okay, so let's go into the category page, and I'll show you how we can consume the value now. So let's go ahead and have a set of curly braces. Okay, so we can literally use the use context hook. Okay, and what we want to do is we want to pass in the context that we want to consume. And remember, this component must be wrapped inside the provider. Okay, so watch this. I can go ahead and get the guild ID as well as the update guild ID. Now let me go ahead and render the guild ID, and you're going to see it's going to show 1, 2, 3. See how cool that is? So now on the menu page over here, when we display all of the guilds, when we click on the guild, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to update the context. We're then going to navigate to the category page. The category page will have the updated context value, and it's going to fetch the correct guild configuration. We probably wouldn't need to. We probably don't need to fetch it in the category page, because it's not until when the user clicks on a specific item to update, that's when we actually need the actual configuration. We could also fetch it when they click on the guild, and then we can just store it in the context and then use it for later. But I would prefer just fetching it when we need it. Okay, but hopefully this provider consumer pattern makes sense. You can see that we have guild context provider, and we're just passing in a hard-coded value for now. But obviously we're not going to do that for the actual application. We're going to need the actual guild ID value. Okay, and we're going to get that when the user selects a guild. So from here, what we're going to do now is, because we pretty much have the context already set up, but what I'm going to do is, instead of passing in these hard-coded values, we're actually going to go ahead and create a state variable at the very top level, so inside app. So we're going to call use state, and we're going to go ahead, and so this is actually just going to be, this is going to keep track of the guild ID. Okay, and it's just going to be a string. So it's going to be an empty string, and we're just going to pass that in right over there. And for set guild ID, actually, I'm going to change I'm actually going to go back to the context real quick. I'm going to change the set guild ID instead. Yeah, that's going to be a lot better. Yep, there we go. And we can go ahead and just, whoops, set guild ID right there. We probably won't need it in category page, because the only page that will really need set guild ID is we really only need it inside menu page because that's the only page that's going to actually update the context. Okay, what is going on here? Let's see. It's giving us this issue. Type dispatch. Let's see. Yeah, I think it's I think it doesn't like this because of the type. Okay, yeah, that's kind of annoying. I wonder if I get the let's see. I could just copy this. Yeah, TypeScript sometimes can be a little bit it can be a little bit annoying, but yeah, you know what? Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna change this back to update guild. And what I'll do is I'll just create a function that will literally just update it for us. So literally all this function will do is just update it for us. And I'm going to change this to ID instead of guild ID. There you go. Alright, cool. Not sure why it's still giving me an issue with that. Let's see. Oh, whoops. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so what I just did here was I created a state variable. I have the variable, and then I also have the setter, and then I also created a function that literally will just update the state for us. The reason why I did that was because I didn't want to really bother trying to get types to work because they're incompatible. So I just created update guild ID. We pass in whatever the value of guild ID is, and as well as this function update guild ID down into the provider. Okay, and now we can consume the guild ID. So right now, if you look at category page, there's no guild ID. If I go ahead and do 11111, you're gonna see it's gonna show 1111. Okay, so essentially in the menu page now, if I had a bunch of guilds, when I click on one, it's gonna go and update. It's gonna go and update that, and I'll show you how that's gonna. I'm gonna demonstrate that with some fake data. So I'll go ahead and create some fake data for now because we don't have a backend set up, and then later on in future episodes, once we get the backend set up, everything's gonna be a breeze. So let's see. I'll go ahead and just create, I guess, a folder called mocks, I guess. And I'll just go and do let's see, guilds.ts for now. And what I'll do is I'll go ahead and just export mock guilds. I'll just export an array. So the guild will obviously have the ID. It will have the name. And it's going to have an icon, which I'm just going to ignore for now. And I'll do 124, 125, React, TypeScript. Now let me go ahead and just render these out real quick. So guilds, map, guild. I actually do want to do a list. Whoops. I'll have to wrap this in the unordered list in just a sec. So let's see, guild.name, and let me wrap this inside an unordered list right now. Okay, so if I look at menu page, let's go to menu. We have everything, right? So when I click on one of these routes, it's going to have to do two things. It's going to have to push us to the category page. And then it's going to have to push us. It's going to have to update the React context. Okay, so we can actually push the route very simply by using the history API. So we can actually just do const history, use history. I wonder if React Router. I think React Router may have gotten rid of use history. Okay, so I think it's actually create browser history. I think create browser history is I think create browser history might be the actual new method that we have to use now. Or actually, wait, no. There's actually a new hook called use navigate. So let's do that. Yeah, seems like they got rid of that. Okay, so on click, let's go ahead and set this up. Navigate.push, or we could just call navigate like that. So we can navigate to categories. So let's just make sure that works. There we go, that works. and there's no issues with that. So we'll update the context first, then we'll navigate. That makes the most sense. So we'll go ahead and call use context, pass in the guild context, so we can get access to guild ID, but we don't need it though. We only need the update guild ID method. We can then go ahead and update that very simply by just passing in guild.id. So whatever guild is clicked on, it's going to update the context with that correct guild ID. And when we are brought to the category page, it's going to display the guild ID. So for example, if I click on TypeScript, it's going to show 125. If I click on React, it's going to show 124. Nest.js 123. Okay, and if we need to make an HTTP call to fetch anything on the category page, we can do that. But like I said, we'll probably have to do that in other pages. Okay, so hopefully this this concept makes sense, and this is why I said that I want to focus more on the actual functionality and the UI logic instead of focusing on what the UI looks like. But now that we understand what we're working with, the rest should be very, very straightforward. Okay, so instead of having the guild ID in the route, we can use the context to keep track of it. You can also do the route approach where you just have the guild ID in the route, but I personally think the context is just way better in my opinion. And context is also really, I think context is also worth learning as well. Okay, so that's gonna be it for this video in regards to context. Hopefully it made lots of sense. It can be a little bit confusing, but if you have any questions, please leave a comment down below. In the next episode, it's probably going to be a longer episode because I think what I want to do is I want to actually focus on just designing everything. Like I want to design the login page, I want to design the menu page. Well, not design, but implement that. And I also want to work on the categories page as well. So that episode is probably just going to be a simple, like 1 hour long episode where I'm just going to just focus on the actual implementation of the UI. There's going to be nothing related to like actual logic. It's just going to be a bunch of CSS. Okay, I figured I would take some time to, pour into that as well. So those who want to follow along can do so. But yeah, so hopefully I'll see you all in my next episode. Peace out.